Again, welcome to Esoteric Lighthouse. We are a group of free and accepted Masons from regular and recognized Masonic Grand Lodges focused on the esoteric, occult, and philosophical lessons found in Freemasonry. This being a public forum, our views and interpretations are not legal or official statements or opinions of any Grand Lodge or Masonic bodies we hold memberships with. All opinions, thoughts, and interpretations are solely of the individual panelists. Ideals of humanity, compassion, selflessness, wisdom. A brain traditionally is associated with the intellect, the cranial vault, the cerebral matter. But in profound esoteric studies, a brain is defined by the type of machine it is. It's a processor, it's a force, it's an action of intelligence and of will. A brain processes physically, nutrients, chemicals, molecules. It processes vitamins, foods, etc. A brain has its material components within different aspects of our body. But on a deeper level, a brain in esotericism refers to how we process thoughts, emotions, and our will. The first brain of the three brains is enclosed within the cranial vault, our head, and our spinal column. This is known as the cerebral spinal nervous system. The second brain concretely corresponds with the central medulla, the dorsal spine, and all of the nervous branches. This relates with our grand sympathetic nervous system, the heart, our emotional qualities, and the nerves. The third brain is not located in some specific place, nor is it related to a specific organ. Indeed, the third brain is constituted by the sympathetic nervous plexus, and in general, by all the specific nervous centers of the physical organism. This is known as the parasympathetic nervous system. So the nervous system of the body is a type of fluid material component that helps the body to transmit information. But in us, it tends to be very mechanical and unconscious. We're not aware of the process and usually of the thought. This is evident throughout our daily life. The law of three. The law of three is the fundamental laws of the universe, reflected in the religious trifectas of world religions. The law of three creates both positive and negative ways. This law is reflected in the psychological structures known as the three centers of the human consciousness, which is intellect, the body, and our emotions. The three brains are the different systems of the functioning that govern our entire world of perception, sensation, and action. In our state of consciousness, the three brains rarely work in harmoniously ways, or our three brains barely work harmoniously. In esoteric psychology, it explains that humanoids have three brains. These are not physical brains or physical matter. Rather, they are psychological divisions of the organized activity. Each brain functions and operates independent of the others. And each one has a host of jobs and duties that can only it can accomplish. You have your intellectual brain, your emotional brain, and your motor instinctive sexual brain. These brains are just machines that transform energy. When analyzed in more detail, the third brain is understood as having three distinct functions in itself. When you look at the three brains, when you look at the head, it's observing the world, the inner life of logic, reasoning, and detailed future plans. The heart is reaching out to the world in the inner life of emotions, memories, images, and visions and dreams. That gut feeling or that is directed into the world by instinct and intuition. Unself-consciousness, immediate, practical, and direct. The intellectual brain is located in the cranium. It is in charge of elaborating, communicating thought associated of ideas and rationalizing. This is the slowest moving center as all of the impulses must pass through the process of comparison of memory, concepts, and other things that we use as tools of judgment. The emotional brain is located in the solar plexus and in the heart. Negative emotions such as worry, fear, resentment, envy, etc., clog up the solar plexus area. The heart can be strongly affected by negative emotions, but it is also capable of experiencing positive and elevated emotions. The emotional brain is faster than the intellectual brain. The body brain, or the motor instinctual sexual brain. The body brain includes the instinctive moving and the sexual functions. Everything from deliberate motion to the muscle memory is unconscious digestive and respiratory function, and all the activities of sex and reproduction are governed by this brain. The body brain is the fastest of all brains. Sex, instinct, and movement can function without any input from the intellect or the emotions. Did you know you had three brains? These three brains are communicating together at any one point in time. Each organ has complex neural networks and is able to store and process information at each, and each has the capacity of neuroplasticity. Your head, the brain in your head is made up of 1 billion neurons. Your heart is made up of 40,000 neurons. In addition to its other functions, it also acts as heart brain, which can sense, feel, learn, and remember. And in your gut, you have 100 million neurons, also nerve cells or brain cells in your intestines. The gut is now being referred to by many scientists as the gut brain. This concludes my portion. And as you know, I like to lead off what I'm currently reading. I'm reading a book called Mind, Body, and Soul by Rabbi Isaac Ginsburg. Solomon's Memory Palace. This is a book about, it's about how helping remember things and using thought objects around your house to center your thoughts to ritual or routine to be able to remember pretty much anything, words or just a vision, anything. So I highly recommend it. I'm about to start the second version of it, which is just titled Memory Palace. And it's about making graphic depictions of something that you want to remember and using art as a way of jogging memory. Um, Another one is the Gate of Unity. And the last one is the Sparks of Light. And this concludes my portion. I'll be followed by a, a Coney, Brother Coney.
Good evening, brothers. How we doing tonight? All right, good. Now, tonight, I'll be talking about Chakras 101. And I'll keep it real brief. As you see here, this is the Konark Sun Temple, and it's famous for its unique architecture. And I really fell in love with this picture. That's why I added it to my PowerPoint. Its geometrical patterns and carved wheels used to serve as sundials. One can witness three images of sun god at three directions to catch the rays of the sun at dawn, noon, and sunset. It's believed to have been built in the 13th century CE, the temple by King Narasimhadeva I. He hailed from the Eastern Ganga dynasty between 1238 and 1250. Temple was commissioned by the king, while Samatarara Mahapatra was the one in charge of its construction. Konark means the sun, and the four corners. The temple was called Black Pagoda, attributing to its dark facade by the Europeans who used it for navigation for their ships. It's said that the temple could draw ships to the shore due to its magnetic powers. So what is a chakra? Chakra is the Sanskrit word for chakra means plexus or wheel or vortex, refers to a number of centers in the subtle anatomy of the human being, with each center corresponding to a different level of consciousness. So what does that mean? Chakras are four centers or points of connection at which energy flows from one vehicle or body of a man to another. So there's specific frequencies, okay, in the ocean of universal energy, and they're defined by specific energies called prana. And it's a distinct psychological and mental activity. In other words, each chakra displays a certain power and a different level of individual consciousness. So there are even cells and tissues that actively generate electrical fields that are detectable on the surface of your skin. You ever you rub your feet on the carpet, you get a little static electricity. Well, there's even a very considerable amount of energy that your body will generate that some people can see because they have the eye to see. This is the law of physics. All organs and tissues produce very specific frequencies in biomagnetic fields, and they come together into what we call energy vortexes in our bodies. These energy vortexes are called chakras. The chakra are known by various names. You've heard them as pranic centers, psychic centers, psychoenergetic centers, and cerebrospinal centers. Next, what is a nadis? Nadis, you'll hear it a lot when you talk about chakras. It's a Sanskrit word which translates as a tube, channel, or flow. It's used to describe the network of channels which allow energy to travel through the body. There are three principal nadis in the body which go through the spinal cord and the chakras, or the vortexes, or the energy centers of the body. These channels in which the life force, or prana, or non-physical, or vital energy flows. While there are several chakra systems in the body, only 7, it's a magical number, 7 are the most important of the physical chakras. Now, there's 3 principal nadis. There's the Adha, the Pingala, and the Sushumna. The Adha stands for comfort, lies to the left of the spine. Pingala, or orange, or tawny, or golden, or solar, is to the right of the spine, mirroring the Ida. The Sushumna is the most significant aspect of human physiology. Only when energies enter into the Sushumna, life really begins. And just a quick note about that last slide. Fundamentally, the Sushumna is attributed lest it has no quality of its own. It is like empty space. If there is empty space, you can't create anything you want. Once energies enter into the Sushumna, we say you attain Varagaya or Raga, which means color. The Varag means no color. You have become transparent. If you have become transparent, if what is behind you is red, you turn red too. You are unprejudiced. Wherever you are, you become a part of that, but nothing sticks to you. Only if you are like this, only if you're in a state of Virag, then you will dare to explore all dimensions of life when you live. So here's some considerations when we talk about nadis and chakras. They're deeply related to the 4 forms of life energies: physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy. For a perfect life, we need balance of these energies. These 4 forms of life energies are interrelated and overlap each other. When balanced, our chakras contribute to our immune system. That's why they say when your mind over body. If you are sad, sometimes your body will emulate that sadness. As much as when you're happy, you can come out of that and heal yourself. It enhances the body's ability to heal itself. Through meditation, you can purify the nadis and the chakras. Purification refers to the separation of gross and subtle negative elements from the raw energies. It includes filtering of negative thoughts, toxin food elements, negative actions, negative visions, negative words. You speak to your universe, your words. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. Also, what you think, therefore you are. What you put in your body, therefore you become. So there's 72,000 nadis and 114 chakras that are most prominent. These are the 7 major chakras of the 21 minor chakras, and there's 86 micro chakras in the human body. Among the 114 chakras, 112 chakras reside within the body, and the other 2 are outside the body. There's the head, the heart, the navel, the throat, and the base of the spine are the 5 main areas that most are accustomed to that are the major chakras. But there's minor chakras as well. They're in our hands, our legs, our tongue, our knee, our elbow, our clavicles, shoulder, our eye, ear, and a nose. All the chakras are always not active. Some are prominent and some are dormant. Balance. Balance is key. So each chakra has its own vibrational frequency, color, and sound that it is attuned to. Chakras can be knocked off balance by any number of things that we spoke about, including stress, trauma, grief, toxins, food, things like that, and even the weather. There's some people that are empaths, and if it's raining, sometimes they can feel very, really depressed. So if one energy center is not functioning well, the others do not function as well as they should. And we'll get into that in just a moment. Chakras transmit and receive energy, which is transmitted into psychic. As was told before, we have 3 brains, emotional, and then there's the physical energy. Too much or too little energy can affect the way we think, act, and feel. Each chakra must be at its correct frequency independently, and it should also be in harmony with each other. They all need to be energized, balanced, and clear. As you can see here in this quick diagram to the right, you can see that you have there's a left and a right. There's what the actual chakra concentrates on, and there is what could block that chakra or that energy from attaining that level of consciousness. As you can see here in your lower chakra, is usually blocked by fear, and it deals with your survival, fight or flight. You have guilt that could ultimately block your pleasure, shame, your willpower. If you're ashamed of something that you've done, it can block your willpower to do anything because you become stuck. Your grief. Some people say you just need a hug. You need some love. That can really open up that chakra if you just let that out and receive the love energy from someone else. Lies, obviously the opposite is truth. Illusion, insight. What you think you see and you know is not what you think because it's not what you see. You need insight. You need an understanding of what you're experiencing based on the knowledge either you are given or you already know. So you have to clear your mind. There's an ego. Ego is one of the biggest things that can block our cosmic energy within ourselves. Cosmic, or that which we connect to the only energy, which is God, which is a verb. So here in this chart, we have chakras and their properties. I found this is really good mapping. You'll look at all the major ones, and then you'll go from location to colors, life principles, what organs, the balance that you need to have. If it's excessive things in your environment that can cloud or block that chakra, something that could deplete that chakra. And then there's even when you get into, and I there's an asterisk on these, but crystals and yoga poses, because you have to understand that this is still speculation at best. I mean, their energy is transmitted from certain crystals. And it has been proven that through certain meditation practices, you can get that energy from that crystal. So they're saying that holding a certain crystal during meditation can open up a chakra because you're focusing on the energy. You're focusing on the source through that crystal. Even certain yoga poses have been caused to open up certain chakras because, again, that's a physical way of positioning your body and causing certain glands to release certain secretions that will cause things to heal in a physical nature. By using the system of the 6 chakras, we can discover through direct experience that the macrocosm of the universe exists within the microcosm of the human being. We can also see the chakras as devices that receive and emit energy and information on different frequencies. The system of the 6 chakras can be seen as a symbolic representation of the spiritual progress of a human being, from the most instinctual level associated with the Muladhara chakra to the most elevated with the Ana chakra. The Sahasrara is the expression of totality and of supreme consciousness. A seventh center, as the Sahasrara is described, but it's not considered a chakra. This is due not only to the wholeness of the energy that it represents, but also because it's considered to be the seat of Shiva and the abode of supreme consciousness. It expresses not only immanent energy, but also transcendence. Mula means root or base, and Adara means substratum or support. Therefore, the word Manara means the basic substratum or the support center, referring to its characteristics as being the foundation center of the human being. Is the first chakra located in the area of the perineum and the seat of vitality, the battery of the being, and is attuned with earth energies and mechanical forces such as gravity. As you research and go on, there's a mention of what's called a 12 chakra system. I'm not going to go into depth into this, but as you can see from the picture to the right, there's a lot of extras added here. What does this mean? It adds depth, context, and appreciation for the understanding of how chakras work and how the best balance energies in our life. Brings forth the vision of our connection to the entire universe, and all living beings are part of a whole. Each of us is grounded to the earth and linked to the universe via a thin cable. Okay, no description, the third degree. All right, that cable stretches from roughly 3 feet below our feet to miles and miles up through the atmosphere and into deep outer space. Again, speculation and theory. It can be thought of as a one brilliant ascension pillar of white light. It connects us to divine source above the crystalline light of the divine at the core of Gaia below. Gaia is another word for earth. Outlined by those who are in the ascension process, actively working the 12 chakra system, archangels, the angelic realm, and higher consciousness. You can see here there's a divine gateway, there's galactic, universal, soul star. So a lot of these are added because there's a theory that once you reach that divine thinking in the crown, you can get to another level where you begin to actually communicate with angels and see things in a very universal manner. So a little bit of history on this. So you see the diagram to the right. I love this diagram. I think it's great because, as most of our watchers and our panelists know, that India is where a lot of knowledge has originated from. Okay, so if you really delve into these diagrams, which goes to what we're talking about, Temple of Man, it really speaks to the chakras, the positioning of our bodies, and things like that, and how the temple looks. So there's not just one chakra system in the original tradition. There are many. Keep in mind, one is not more right than another, except relative to a specific practice. For example, if you're doing a 5-element practice, you use a 5-chakra system. If you're internalizing the energy of 6 different deities, you use a 6-chakra system. The chakra systems are prescriptive, not descriptive. We're not being taught about the way things are. We're being given a specific yogic practice. We visualize an object made of color light, shaped like a lotus or spinning wheel, at a specific point in the body, and then activate mantric syllables in it for a specific purpose. That's a sound. You'll have certain mantric things that you do with your hands. You have certain sounds that you'll make, and that will cause energy to flow through your body and through certain breathing techniques as well. The psychological states associated with the chakras are completely modern and Western. All associated chakras with psychological states is a modern Western innovation that started with Carl Jung. The 7 chakra system is popular today, derives not from an ancient scripture, but from a treaty written in 1577. The main purpose of chakra system is to function as a template for nyasa, which is the installation of mantras and deities. Installation of mantras and deity energies at specific points of the subtle body. So you begin to take on energies that are greater than you into your body, and you begin to function and become conscious and aware. So that's why you have to prevent certain things from going in, saying certain things, thinking certain things. The seed mantra that you think goes with the chakras actually goes with the elements that happen to be installed in those chakras. It's a fundamental mantra associated with the first 5 on every website you can Google. Actually do not belong to those chakras per se, but rather to the 5 elements installed in them. So that concludes my presentation on chakras. Here's my books of reference here. The Chakras by C.W. Ledbetter, Serpent Power by Sir John Woodroffe, and Wheels of Life by Anadia Judith, PhD. And that is it. Thank you. Christopher Leonard, you got it.
Good evening. I am Christopher Leonard, and I will be presenting on the 7 principles of man. Quick agenda. We will be discussing the importance and familiarity of 7. Why are there 7 principles? What are the 7 principles? I will give an explanation of each principle. The 7 principles and the lodge, first broken down into the higher triad, then the lower quaternary, the 7 principles and the Masonic apron, a visual comparison, and I will provide my references and books. The importance and familiarity of 7. All our lives, we've come across the number 7, whether it's the 7 days of the week, the 7 classical planets, the 7 seas and 7 continents, the 7 colors in a ray of sunlight or visible in the light spectrum, the 7 liberal arts and sciences, which is the trivium and quadrivium, the 7 days of creation according to the biblical tale, 7 notes on the musical scale, and for those who study deeply, the 7 hermetic principles. Why are there 7 principles of man? The number 7 has played a significant part in mythology, religion, and esotericism, both Eastern and Western. Theosophical literature explains that this universal septenary principle derives from the universal principle of the Trinity, which in turn is derived from the unity or the single unit, which we break into 3, and based on those combinations of 3, we can form 7. In the teachings of Theosophy, H.P. Blavatsky and the masters describe the human being as consisting of 7 principles divided into a higher triad and a lower quaternary. The number 7, as composed of 3 and 4, expresses action and realization, and is thus the number of completion of form. Now, there are other breakdowns of 7 that represent different things, but we're focusing on 3 and 4 today. A triad naturally produces a septennate by its own internal relations, since its 3 factors can group themselves in 7 ways and no more. So if we take the single unit, take A. Now, if we look at A, we have the higher end of A, the lower end of A, and the middle of A, which can give us the unit into 3, A, B, C. A, B, C, we can combine those different ways, A, B, A, C, B, C, and then the whole of A, B, C, which gives us 7. So from 1, a unit, to 3, then based on those combinations of 3, 7. What are the 7 principles of man? The highest principle is the Atma or Atman, which is the divine spirit. The second is the Buddhi or the spiritual soul. Third is the Manas, which is the conscious ego or the conscious mind. The fourth is the Kama or the desire principle, that animal soul. 5 is the Prana and the vital life force. 6 is the Linga Sharia, which is the etheric or astral double. 7 is the Thula Sharia, which is the physical body. To the right is a visual representation of how these principles relate to the Param Atman, which is the universal all, or that universal soul that every living being is connected to. Atma, which is the divine spirit, is a Sanskrit word that means self and is the higher and supreme part of man's spiritual being. This sense of self is universal and is the same for all living creatures. This represents our sense of existence and of being alive. The innermost spiritual consciousness of every organism is a part of the universal self, or Atman. An example is a single drop in an all-encompassing ocean. Blavatsky describes this as the ray of the absolute all, which is present in every living being, and in all of us exists that ray of the all. The Atman neither progresses, forgets, nor remembers. It does not belong to this plane of reality or existence. It is but the ray of light eternal which shines upon and through the darkness of matter. The Buddhi, or the spiritual soul, is the second highest principle of our constitution and is the spiritual consciousness. Dr. de Perucker, in his occult glossary, explains it as such. The buddhi is a faculty in man which manifests as understanding, judgment, discrimination, and it is inseparable. It is an inseparable veil or garment for the Atman. Um, there's a scripture that gives a little bit about that, and John, John chapter 3, verse 5, and Jesus answered, "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God." So the buddhi would be that water that the Spirit manifests through. So the channel through which the divine knowledge reaches the ego, or the next stage, the manas, and serves as a vehicle for the direct radiation of light of the Atman. The monad, which is the conjunction of the Atman and the buddhi, and is the vehicle of the Atma. The supreme divine energy resides in the buddhi, but it is latent or passive. Manas, this is the conscious intellectual ego. This is you, this is man. This is the mind principle of man, or the consciousness. Thinking, the permanent individual, consisting of twofold attributes of the immortal higher manas and the mortal lower manas. Higher manas, which is inspired by the monad, elevates towards spiritual, abstract, and intellectual things of goodness, truth, purity, love, and compassion, striving for spiritual mastery through innumerable incarnations. The lower manas is in conjunction with the kama, which is the desire principle, and is attracted to the material things and the desires of human life, commonly called the mortal or the personal ego. So just a quick example, if you study Buddha, he would be an example of someone who exists using the higher manas, or also the Christ figure in the Bible. These are people who exist towards those spiritual, abstract things of goodness and purity. The lower manas, we all know them. These are people who live for material. They live for that next pleasure, that next fun, that next thrill. They only exist in that lower aspect of our consciousness. The manas resides between the spiritual and physical aspects of man, that point of balance between self-indulgence and self-mastery, the animal and godlike in human nature, because we have the capacity for both. Kama, this is the desire principle. This principle of the human nature when in physical, this is the desire principle of the human nature when in physical incarnation. This is the source and center of desires, passions, and our sensual nature, often referred to as the animal soul. All animal needs, such as hunger, thirst, sexual desire, all passions such as love, hatred, envy, and jealousy come under it. This principle is the most material of our nature and the one that binds us to earthly material life. It is this desire for the desire for sentient experience, for experiencing those material joys, for getting that next dollar, buying that boat, that next love interest, that flashy car, those shoes that make me feel good, but does nothing for me spiritually. United to the lower manas, the mind of kama manas becomes the normal human brain intelligence. The kama is the driving force in the human constitution. It is colorless. It is neither good nor bad, and it's only such as the mind and soul direct its use. So this principle can either serve us or it could rule us. And as it says, it is for us to use our mind and soul to direct. So we can fall into that lower aspect of manas, utilizing the kama for everything material, or we can subjugate those passions and subdue those passions so they work for us instead of becoming subdued by them. Prana, this is the vital life force. This is the vitality or energy that keeps the physical body alive and is the animating principle in all animal and human bodies. It is explained in the secret doctrine as having for its lowest subdivision the microbes of science. These are the invisible lives that build up the physical cells, which are the countless myriad of lives that build the tabernacle of clay, our physical bodies. So if you break down the single atom that makes up any part of man or any living being, that atom has a piece of that life force. And every single atom that we are composed of contains this life force. And every cell consisting of these same atoms has its own life force. And as we continue to escalate up the molecular structure, all those microbes and all those cells, that life force combines to give us our own life force. So it's the whole thing that we have to break down and look at the molecular structure of man and see every piece of us has this vital life force. This is the radiating force or energy of the Atma and permeates the whole being of the object universe. The next principle, the etherical body double, is the vehicle for prana, acting as a means of communication or bridge between the prana and the dense physical body. Our linga sharira is the etheric astral double, and this is the subtle, unseen body of the dense physical body. It is the form, mold, and blueprint upon and all around which the dense physical body is built. The etheric astral double is the vehicle through which prana flows to the physical body and is connected with the physical body by what some call a silver thread or silver cord. This body, flush with prana, maintains our physical identity, keeping the bodies in its shape in spite of the continual flux of entering and departing atoms. This principle is made of astral matter or substance, what science calls ether. And a great example of this principle is many people who serve in our military or people who are in car accidents, and they may lose body parts. And after a while, after the healing, they often sometimes feel as if that limb is still attached, is still there. However, physically it doesn't exist, but because this is the blueprint of our physical makeup, that astral part still is there for them, and it feels like it's there, even though it is no longer physically represented. The stula sharira, which is the physical body, and this is simply just a dense physical body. It is described as being the child of the linga sharira, which is the body double, the astral double, and that's the mother by conception of the prana. So the prana and the astral double, which is the blueprint, the prana is the driving force, the blueprint is the receiving force, and creates together that physical body. This principle illustrates a basic spiritual fact of the cosmos: as above, so below. As it is below, so it is above. The physical body, in its substance, structure, and function, is a miniature cosmos. It is the vehicle of contact with our physical nature and human life, where we gain the necessary lessons in experience and development. This allows our higher principles to act on all atoms throughout the range of our physical and mental contacts, helping in the evolution of those atoms. And this is just the body that holds every other principle, and all together acting as one unit or one body. The higher triad and the lodge. The Atma, the divine spirit, is represented by our junior warden. And for those brothers who are Masons, you will, if you read your opening, closing, and study it, you will see these correlations. The junior warden observes the time and calls the craft from labor to refreshment. Man's most vital refreshment is the period of sleep or that rest. The Atma or junior warden guards the consciousness during sleep, preventing it from entering lower astral realms, and at the proper time will cause the consciousness to return and awaken to begin a new day. The jewel of the junior warden and his position in the south at high meridian represents man's highest spiritual aspirations. The Buddhi, the spiritual soul, is represented by the senior warden. The senior warden assists the ego or the worshipful master in opening his lodge and maintaining harmony. As the seat of high consciousness, remember this is the part that reflects the light of the Atman, the senior warden or Buddhi has charge of the jewels and implements, that is, of man's mental and moral faculties and normal functions. The Buddhi or senior warden recognizes that there are physical and spiritual necessities and provides compensation or wages for all to ensure no part of man's constitution is neglected or goes away dissatisfied, maintaining harmony throughout our physical and spiritual body. The manas, the conscious ego, is represented by the worshipful master. The worshipful master opens and governs the lodge, sets the craft at work, and provides instruction. The ego, or worshipful master, is the inner source of power and is the controlling force of man, directing all his efforts. So that conscious part of us, we get up, we decide how we're going to go through our day, we decide if we're going to read and study and meditate to improve our spiritual self, or if we're going to sit and watch TV all day and eat junk food, living in that lower aspect of ourselves. We choose how we govern our lodge. You can either run it well to aspire to better, or you can let it deteriorate to its worst state. The lower quaternary and the lodge. The common desire is represented by the senior deacon, who waits on the worshipful master, the manus, the senior warden, the booty, and the junior warden, the atma, prepares and introduces candidates, close visiting brethren, uh, serving the higher triad, preparing the soul for human initiation by evolving through the various kingdoms, which is a whole nother conversation, until the soul is introduced through the animal kingdom to the human. The senior deacon mirrors the function of the karma, aiding the candidate's progression through the symbolic degrees. So simply put, there are theories and books that say we start in the mineral kingdom, so at the lowest molecular level, and we evolve through each kingdom, the plant kingdom, vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, until eventually incarnating as a man or in our physical self as a human. And through these different kingdoms, as we evolve, as our soul evolves, we gain and learn different lessons. And the goal is to keep learning lessons and to keep evolving our soul to proceed higher and higher through our soul. The prana, the vital life force, represented by the junior deacon, waits on the worshipful master, the senior junior wardens, is placed in charge of the door to the inner recesses of man's constitution. The junior deacon, prana, governs the whole of man's constitution, mental and physical, in regards to who can enter it, as it permeates the countless microbes and lives that make up our bodies. Now, we all know that everything is constantly vibrating. Every atom is constantly in motion. So while we seem to be physical, everything is constantly in motion. It is physical and it is solid, but with it being constantly in motion and constantly vibrating, it isn't on a molecular level. But because of this principle, this also protects us from microbes or other things that would enter our bodies to do other things. In the same way, the junior deacon protects the lodge. He protects who can enter, who leaves, who enters. We have to inculcate these lessons and remember them, as it can play a mind on what thoughts can enter also. So it's a double function. Physically it works, but also mentally it works too. What do we eat? What are we bringing into our bodies that can either help us, heal us, or can harm us? So this is a conscious thought on how this principle can influence our daily life. The linga sharira, which is the etheric or astral double, is represented by the secretary. Observes the will and pleasure of the worshipful master or ego, records all proceedings, which are the experiences, emotions, thoughts, and sensations, receives all values, which are how we react to these events, and pays them to the treasurer or the physical body. So this is a recording of everything we ever experienced. And through this experience, through the astral double, it takes those experiences and creates a physical sensation. So take a thought, think about that. It'll come to you a little later. The stula sharira, which is the physical body, is represented by the treasurer. Observes the will and pleasure of the worshipful master or ego, receives all transmissions from the etheric body and pays them out by order of the ego or worshipful master as mental and physical action. For this action to be effective, support has to come from all portions of man's constitution. Again, every signal, every synapses comes from the brain. We feel those through the various portions that come together to make sure those signals are received, understood, and transmitted, whether it's you moving or whether it's something as simple as a touch on your hand or touching a hot stove. This is just a visual representation of the 7 principles under Masonic apron. And in one of the previous slides, I mentioned as composed of 3 and 4 represents completion of form. And 3 and 4, the 3 being the 3 higher principles of the Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, and the 4 being the 4 lower quaternary of the lower, the prana, the astral, the etheric double, the physical, and the kama. So you can see the interpreters apron with the flap up and the master mason's apron. I won't go into an explanation of that, but I'm hoping our brothers who are aware can see the correlation and understand how we progress from the entered apprentice to the fellowcraft apron, and then finally to the master mason's apron. References and books, I use theosophy.wiki and the theosophysociety.org or theosociety.org. The books I used were The Seven Principles of Man by Leoline Wright, The Seven Principles of Man by Annie Besant, of course, The Secret Doctrine by H.P. Blavatsky, and a great book I've been reading, Ancient Masonry by C.C. Zane. And this concludes my presentation.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I learned a lot, man. Christopher Leonard, you got to share that with me, man. You dropped some heavy stuff there, brother.
Very heavy.
Yeah,
You worked yourself around the whole lodge.
yeah, he did, didn't he?
Stations and places.
Yeah.
You guys are inspiring. So when I took on the task of creating this presentation, I figured I had to swing with some big boys. I have to try to step my game up so I can represent the group well. So,
nah, man,
you did a great job, bro. You did a great
Yeah,
job.
outstanding job.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Now, I got a question. I know we're getting ready to get into this, but Mike, on yours, you left off of the last thing talking about the gut. So I didn't realize, and I didn't learn about that gut truly being like you said, like another brain of yours. Could you go elaborate just a little bit more into more of like why the gut is considered like the brain, in the sense, like some of the things that go on in there, and why people are thinking like that's another brain that we need to dive into, if you don't mind?
Well, when that instinct kicks in and you're thinking, all right, well, I'll use a scenario for me being in the military. A lot of my stuff was, hey, we need an emergency resupply right now. So that gut instinct is that, okay, this is what I need to do. Whereas you already know, hey, I need to make this action happen, and this is how I'm going to make it happen. Without thought, you just barking out orders. You saying, hey, you go over here, you go do this, you go do that. Well, that's that gut instinct kicking in. That's that gut brain telling you to make these things happen. Whereas your brain in your head, not your instinctual, but your intellectual brain, that's that brain that's sitting here reading the book and saying, hey, well, the book says the Atman, Buddhi, the Manas, it equals the three brains on these levels and blah, blah, blah. That's that brain. Then your emotional brain, which is in your heart, that's when you're like, hey, you're thinking about your kids, and that, oh man, I love my kids, my wife, she's a beautiful woman, or that's that heart brain. And these three different brains, they act like the centers. Everything we talked about today, they all correlate with each other. If you think about the aspects of the chakras and the seven principles inside of man and the three brains, it's how everything is in sync. It's about harmony. It's about harmonizing. And that's what masonry is about. It's about bringing things into harmony. If you take these three different lectures and you compile them all together and you think about it, all we were talking was bringing things into the center, bringing it to the equilibrium, and having you come into harmony. Everything is always out of sync and out of harmony. So what we're trying to do is, with mine, is you get your intellectual brain, your heart, and your instinct to work in synchronicity with your chakras, and you bring that energy up. And when you bring that energy up, those seven principles of man, you go from, you seeing the Atman, the Buddhi, and the Manas, and you are becoming a whole being. And in some things, they call it chrism or crystallized.
And I think brother Coney, he kind of hit it home. And I'm just gonna assume, because that brother normally does his research, that what he stated, this was a new one on me, that in the gut was 100 million neurons. Yeah, so that speaks, wherever there's neurons there's something going on there, right? We know that.
Yeah.
So I wrote that down. That was the first time I knew about the neurons in the heart, because I've studied, they said there's more activity going on in the heart than it is in the brain. And I don't want to get too far off topic, but I studied the heart frequencies before, so I knew there were neurons there. But that was an eye opener for me as far as neurons being in the intestines and so forth. That I didn't know.
And
Right.
I would say it was an eye opener for me as well. It had me actually go and look and
Oh, did you
research.
look? Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
because
yeah,
what he was referencing was the enteric nervous system. It has millions of neurons that are hiding, and they actually talk to the brain via the vagus or
yeah.
vagus.
Yeah, you know what? And that's the beautiful part. I'm glad you brought that up because see, even amongst us, I was going to do the same thing. I'm going to check it. But that's the thing, you know what I mean? Like we're not here to try to believe what someone is saying. And I do appreciate the brethren when they know that they're treading into the speculative waters. They tell you. They're literally telling you this is speculation and theory. So on our program, we do deal with speculation and theory from time to time. But again, I was gonna do the same thing. I was as soon as the show was over, I'm going, hey man, I'm gonna check that out, man. Come on.
Yeah,
Neurons in the
yeah. And the reason I checked it was because, like you, this was something new. I said, "Wow, I didn't know that."
yeah, I didn't
So,
know that either.
I'm looking it up. Like, hey, what is this new science, if you will?
Yeah.
And then back to brother Mike's point, when he talked about the different brains, like from one, the brain in your heart, we call that nowadays emotional intelligence. And then your brain is the main brain, if you will, is mainly logic.
Yeah, the
Whereas a
main brain
gut feeling
rationalizes.
is whereas a gut feeling is an instinct without rationale. You just know it's right. I don't have to sit here and rationalize it. I don't have to come up and logically, I just know it's right. And this is going to go back to what you had stated earlier before we got on the call, as well as brother Charles said, is experience. Experience leads you to those gut instincts because, hey, I'm not trying to bite off of farmers, but I am. You know a thing or two because you've seen a thing or two. So
Yeah.
you know how to react without using logic or reasoning, just based off of your gut instinct. Because, hey, I've seen this before. I know the outcome and I know how to address it and resolve whatever issue is concerned just based off of that feeling.
Yeah, and the beautiful part about this, with hanging out with you guys, I get to learn about all these different schools of thought, is what I call them, and it's funny how they all kind of talking the same stuff. They may use different words. They may say seven over here and one say nine over here. I don't let that confuse me. I know what they're really trying to convey, right? And even in masonry, as they went through the presentations, I wrote down the three brains. People say, well, there's no three brains, but this is just a way of I would say
How many
framing.
brains do you have in the seats in the lodge? In the
Yeah,
principal seat?
I'm with you. And the thing is, it's a way of framing things up too. You know what I mean? It's like so people can better understand it. Literally, when he was going through that, I was saying, that's masonry. Because at the end of the day, on the first degree, you're taught to get in control of your emotions. To do what? You're dealing with passions and desires. A desire is something you want, right? It's a nice to have it. A passion is something you're willing to risk your health and go through pain to get it. You're passionate about it. But all of these are dealing with emotions, right? So we're taught emotional intelligence in the first degree. And in order to be able to govern ourselves like animals govern themselves instinctively, we have to be able to govern ourselves morally. And to have moral control, you must have emotional control. Then, as you move into the second degree is literally about the cultivation and development of your intellect, the mind, right? And so the first one that you talked about, the instinctual part of you, that's just going to happen no matter. You just wake up and breathe, right? When you go to sleep at night, your heart's going to beat, your blood is going to flow. But the beauty of all of this is, as he's speaking, as the brothers were speaking about this, I was doing correlations with the things that I'm familiar with, and I said, this is the same stuff. The truth is the truth, and all it is they're bringing the truth to the human mind from different angles. Literally, that's what these different schools of thoughts are doing. So I hope that especially our brothers that are within the fraternity don't get too confused, because this is what we teach in Masonry. Emotional intelligence on the first degree, that passions and desires are emotions. And then the second degree, it's literally the cultivating development of the mind, intellectual development.
And then, getting back to masonry, and when you look at the 3 degrees and the 3 penalties, and what are these 3 penalties, where are they located?
Yeah.
It's saying a lot about what you're doing, and it flows into what Brother Christopher Leonard was talking about with the prana and things like that. Breath, wind, air. Where does that come from? And when those things are removed from you, you are left deaf, dumb, and blind and can't breathe.
Yeah.
So you're put in a state of mental inadequacy because you can't think rationally. You don't have emotional intelligence to go through things because you're numb, and your instinct isn't working because you've given up.
Yeah.
That's physical death in a mental state. And what masonry is doing is teaching you to come out of that physical death and to use these brains in a more positive way instead of the way that we've been doing, just going through life as mechanical things where we're like these, I don't want to use animals on a wheel rolling around. So I'll use, somebody putting gas in a car and we're just rolling down the street of life. Masonry and these schools of thought are teaching you to break that mold, to think beyond just the mechanical thinking of day-to-day life.
To grow to actually, to keep you from laying heavy like a lizard on the asphalt of life, right? It literally, it separates us, these different brains. And again, I don't want people to get too caught up in the terminology. Like you may go to another school of thought and they may not even call it 3 brains. They may call it 3 something else. At the end of the day, it's the same teachings coming at you. You're trying to govern the lower aspect of your nature, which is the animal part of your nature, and to rise up to the higher aspect of your nature, which is dealing with your intellect. That's what separates, we've talked about this before, that's what separates this from my dog. My dog ain't really thinking about any investments or buying a new dog house or any of those types of things, right? But it's trying to eat. You know what I mean? Every single day it's trying to eat. So um, these different schools realize that, man, even though we're part of the animal kingdom, we're endowed with something unique and special called an intellect.
Yeah, I think through the years and growing up, we've heard a lot of these terms a lot in different ways from our parents and our grandparents. They used to say, "Oh, he's an emotional eater. When he's sad,
Yeah.
he eat a whole bunch,"
Yeah.
or he thinks with his heart so much. He just puts so much love into it, and he sees everything with rose-colored glasses. Or we say, you know what, you're putting too much logic into it. You're thinking too hard. Don't just go with your gut and do it. So we say these things, these colloquialisms so much, but it really is the teachings that have been like it was said, in all these different schools of thought throughout the ages, just a different way of saying it in a context, which i.e. could be a parable, a story, truth and mythology mixed together, whatever it is, but the purpose and intent is always to get you to focus on what it is to make you balanced, to get you back into the equilibrium or that middle pillar position to where your mind, thought, and your actions are in line with what is the purpose and overall intent of you in earth. Because remember, you're grounded, but you're still connected. And you have to have that frame of mind to get in that frequency, again, to be on that same wavelength of thinking. We say it all the time, brother, let's get on the same wavelength here. Get me on the same page. Well, we saying the same thing. We're just not saying it mystical. We're just saying the same thing. So we say these things so much we don't even realize it. So that's good points.
Yeah, very good points. And I tell you, oh, go ahead, Brother Barrett.
Oh no, I was gonna say I finally found it. So the
Oh,
video that's on Amazon is called "The Gut, Our Second Brain." It's an
okay.
awesome. The
What's it
Gut,
called again?
our
The gut?
our second brain.
The gut.
Now, what was two things I noticed when Brother Coney was going through his presentation. I did learn, and you're looking at the representation of the chakras as it moved up, the shapes became a little bit more complex. When you're going to this higher learning, and to me, I always look at anything with like sacred geometry. So I'm gonna go back later on. I'm gonna get that picture. I'm gonna go through it. I'm gonna look and see if there's any correlation because I don't know. It maybe does, maybe it doesn't. But going to the gut, in this documentary, they're talking about how they're studying the gut to be able to help out with Alzheimer's because some of the neurons and things that you have going on, if we can figure out how the gut repairs itself and does some of the inner workings that it has, it is shown to have, and like again, this is speculative, it's shown that it could have some kind of progress in helping out individuals who have Alzheimer's. And to me, I'm speaking from a new brother. So any person that's watching this, I'm just now learning about this stuff the past like years. Some of these brothers have been studying this for decades. But just as a new brother, just go down this path and just open your mind up to anything. You don't have to believe everything. Like they said, you can go and do your own research, but open up and read, like click everything you can possibly click. Read everything you possibly can, because you'll be surprised that everything you're studying out there, if you just study your body, you'll study the cosmos. And our ancient brethren, when I'm thinking about masonry, that's all I can think about is that they knew what was going on there light years away because they knew what was going on in themselves. So what disconnect do we have right now in this society where we can't figure some of this stuff out? You know what I mean? So that tells me we need to go back to a simpler way of thinking and kind of push all this other stuff to the side so we can get back in tune. And again, equilibrium balance comes back into play, man. That's the ultimate goal of life, you know?
And that leads right into Brother Akoni's lecture about those crystals. Then I started thinking about, Brother Barrett, I think it was Brother Barrett that asked the question the other day about the breastplate. I remember like I'm big into crystals. When you come into my house, I have a huge quartz crystal there. And I remember when I first started messing with crystals and I chatted with my wife, she's like, what's all that all about? And then she's really deep into the church and things like that. So I said, go look in the Bible. It's there. You know what I mean? The crystals are there. Like a lot of people think it's something spooky, but I'm like, but it's not spooky when we're dealing with the priest. You remember the high priest, he couldn't even go into the Holy of Holies without crystals on. That's really what the breastplates are. They're 12 stones, crystals. I have a few of those stones myself. But one of the things when we're talking about harmony and so forth, I pointed you guys to that write-up that I had did in one of the Holy Royal Ark rooms. The thing was, there's a thing called, everyone knows my background is communications in the military. So I went in during a time when everything wasn't so fancy, right? We used to have to manually tune radios. And inside of that radio was a crystal. It was called a crystal oscillator. And you manually tune it. So if you stimulate a crystal, it will vibrate and it will vibrate to a certain frequency. So when I started getting into crystals, I said, well, I know about crystals. I remember crystal oscillators back in the military. You had to have a certain crystal to tune a certain frequency. And then people start talking to me about chakras. Well, I know that anything that moves generates a frequency. So if there's certain things that are moving in my body, and then they're saying that if you take a certain crystal and you bring it close to something that's vibrating, and that crystal is vibrating itself, it will, what we used to call it in the military, frequency resonance. Literally, it's like if that kind of confuses people, it's like a tuning fork. If you take one fork and then you hit the other fork and it starts resonating, it'll actually cause that other fork to start resonating at its same frequency. And that's when I started going, well, maybe this, I know crystal therapy is speculative in nature, but I said, maybe they're on to something here. You know what I'm saying? It's like what you're doing is if one fork is out of tune, you take the other fork that's tuned and you hit it and it will bring this other one in alignment. And so in my mind, speculatively speaking, I'm going, is that what's going on with these crystals? There's certain parts of us are out of tune, and then they bring these crystals in and the crystals will get you to a certain level. Again, it's speculative, but I've gotten into it myself. Like I said, I have crystals all over the house, pyramid crystals, all over the place. But I'm no different than the high priest. If I'm spooky, you got to say that the high priest was spooky too,
Right.
because he used it as a mechanism to talk to deity. And so another quick one I want to throw out there is, you guys remember in Revelations chapter 21, there was a crystal city. There was a city, I call it a spaceship. Okay. It came out of the sky. They call it New Jerusalem. And on the bottom of this ship, it had crystals on the bottom of this thing. So this was called the tabernacle in heaven. So here I am speculating again, old calm guy. I'm going, could this breastplate have been some type of communication device with its 12 crystals to stay in resonance? This tabernacle on the earth, because that's what it was, a tabernacle. Could it be what was keeping the folks here on earth in this tabernacle in line and in frequency, in harmony with that tabernacle? Again, it's just speculation. Don't beat me up on this one, right? I don't have any facts or any proof, but I'm just saying, what is the purpose of all this stuff? Why couldn't the high priest just walk into the Holy of Holies without it on? Why did he need this device, this crystal plate, breastplate to communicate? And again, if you go back and you study the old radios, how you tune to certain frequencies was you stimulated crystals to generate certain frequencies. So he got me kind of fired up when he brought. I didn't know he was doing anything on the chakras, because I'd have been a little bit more. It's been a while since I've actually studied chakras and stuff, but it is a school of thought worth studying and taking serious. Like I said, I got crystals all over the place, and when people are pretty sad, like if I run into a brother that's sad, I normally will get him a rose crystal, and some brothers have looked at me like, "What's up with that?" But it deals with your heart chakra,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yes. Some powerful stuff you guys putting out today.
No, hey, Past Master Watson, question is, because we were talking about the vibrations, now
Yeah.
I'm thinking in the lodge, it's always funny. Like I'm sitting Worshipful Master right now, and let's say we're in the lodge and we do our raps to basically get at the beginning of the opening. It's weird. It's weird when like one comes in too quick, and you be like, hold on, wait a minute, we're not looking at each other. We're not synced. It's something else. I'm thinking like the lodge is supposed to represent like your temple. So if you're going and you're opening up the day and one part of your body's not matching up, and your temple is like, or something like that's like weird. And it's just funny that you think about it, because I always want to know, why do we do those 3 raps? Like I like, to me, that's probably just getting your body and getting the temple all in order and getting everybody focused and aligned into the same spot. That's my opinion now, but you know what I mean? Y'all can teach me something later, but you know what I mean? But that opening them raps,
Yeah, those opening raps, those 3 opening raps, if you look at them and you look at the stations, where are their locations?
Yeah.
East, south, west.
Yeah.
Your mind, your heart, your gut.
Yeah.
See, that's why I roll with y'all. See, this is dang.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And and the beauty of masonry, I always say when I give lectures, is it's not dogmatic. So if that doesn't resonate with a brother, and brother say, I'm not feeling it, right? I feel it. That made me go, But we're free to say that, nah, I'm not feeling that, and move on. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's man, I had so many notes on this one. You guys gonna have me up all night try to research some of this stuff, and then I got the video to watch, the gut in our second brain. I'm definitely ready to get into that. One of the things that I studied with the chakras was because I used to think it was kind of spooky, right? When they start talking chakras, and then I found that most chakras are tied to an actual organ, right? And so I found that these organs actually give off certain hormones into the body. So we know that if you associate a chakra with an organ, we know that these chakras affect your body, because basically we're walking around with just a bunch of cells that are duplicating themselves every day, right? And so these cells, the environment, just like we breathe air, this is the ecosystem that we live in. Your cells live in your bloodstream. And what changes the ecosystem in your bloodstream? How hormones are released in there. So if your chakras are out of whack, or let's just bring it home, your organs in your body that are vibrating at a certain frequency which Brother Coney mentioned to be a wheel or vortex, right? Because everything is vibrating, right? If these are out of line, then there are other things that are going to be out of line within the body as well, especially when these hormones start, maybe shooting off too much or not shooting out enough. One of the things, I got a few brothers that, I normally can call really late at night because they have hard time sleeping. And, it's a certain hormone that goes off. I want to say it's a melatonin that goes off that tells the body, hey man, it's time for you to go to bed. Right? And then when you get up in the morning, again, let there be light. Light comes in through the eyes, and once it's hit to a certain part of the brain, it tells the brain, it must be time to get up, right? And then it starts to send off another hormone, which I think is serotonin, right? So if these melatonin and serotonin, I'm just using those as an example, are out of whack, it throws everything out of sync in the body. People can't sleep. Serotonin, a lack of serotonin in the body is what I've been told is causes depression, right? So again, here we are. These ancient schools of thought were trying to make sense of the human temple, literally, and they gave these different things names. But if you can get past the spookiness, as I keep saying spooky, because people, when you mention Chakra, they're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's spooky. Or if you mention something like crystal therapy, oh, that's spooky, until you show them that it ain't spooky when I show it to you inside of the Bible, right?
Right.
That the high priest had to have, and they were specifically crystals, right? So I hope folks aren't getting spooked out. Just open up your mind and do your own research. That's the thing. That's the key here. And I think one of the brothers mentioned that earlier. Just do your own research.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too far into other houses and other schools of thought, or when you're talking about the seven chakras, but in with revelations and certain degrees and other mystery schools, the seven chakras represent the seven churches. Those are the seven seals.
Okay,
On
come on
the,
now.
on that sealed book, and there's only one person who can break those seven seals and do those certain things.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
It's about, remember the key word I always use was consciousness.
Yeah.
So every level you gain an understanding from knowledge and practicing, and you begin to get wisdom. So that next level of consciousness, it takes you into what they thought was another dimension,
Right.
or what they call the fourth dimension of understanding. So what the speculation is, and there's no real theory to prove this, nobody's seen it or heard it, but the breastplate actually was similar to what would be considered a computer keyboard.
Mm,
And if you were to, the priest would activate said breastplate when he went behind the Holy of Holies. That's why he had to be pure. And the energy by which that breastplate, it was communicating through certain sounds or frequencies to God on behalf of the people, whatever their request of God was. So when he went before God, because remember now, God is pure energy. You can't see, it's just bright light. I ain't gonna be able to, you can't, nobody can sustain, because in the Bible it says that he had to hide Moses in the crevice of the rock, and his hinder part, he only saw God's hinder parts. So
mm,
the energy is so prominent. You got energy has to speak to energy, frequency to frequency, sound to sound. So that breastplate is configured in such a way that the speculation is that those stones are configured in a fashion that it is a
mm,
code. It is a code
mm,
that only God could understand. Now, I'm not trying to get into royal arts, but this is the beauty of it. Is by which he could connect with what was inside the ark. Now we know what's inside the ark, right? It's the
mm-hmm,
spine,
mm-hmm.
Aaron's rod, right? So
Yeah.
again, you're going up that spine, the Kundalini, right? You got the table of Shubra, then you got the commandments, that which is written on what? The heart, okay? You know the commandments of God. So it goes into all of that. That's the only way he could go inside the ark, or he can get inside the consciousness of that which is here. He had to have the code to get in there.
Yeah. It's beautiful. And this I had mentioned in the Holy Royal Art group as well. I had mentioned about Ermin and Thurman.
Oh
And it's funny because I had asked the question, is this the modern, was that the ancient Ouija board? You know what I mean? Because, and again, I say these things because people tend, when they, if someone was using a Ouija board, and I'm not advocating that you do those things. I haven't personally researched the Ouija board, so I don't know. But I'm just saying, when I was reading this in the Bible, I said, that sounds like something like a Ouija board or something. You're asking, to make a decision, yes or no. And so, but we seem to, it gets all spooked out when we say Ouija board. But when we go back to the Bible and we read that they were using some ancient form of a Ouija board, the Urim and Thummim, to get answers, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deep, what they call it, divination. It was divination tool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And
There you
see,
go.
here's the
Those three must
misconception.
agree.
The misconception is that in the Bible, a lot of people go to the scripture where Saul went to the seer, they called her, and tried to ask for her to talk to the king, say, hey, I need you to talk to the king. So he actually, and it says in the Bible, she talked to the spirit and came out the ground and asked him certain questions. And they said, well, that's witchcraft. I said,
Mm.
well, no, you got to understand something now. The king knew who to go to get answers. It wasn't a bad thing. It's just when you use it in a derogatory manner to do wrong things, okay, that's when you start to go towards gray areas and you start to do stuff because that whole black and white magic thing. I'm still on the fence about that. I don't think there's a difference. I think magic is magic. It's just how you use it and your heart and intent.
Right.
And a lot of people misconstrue and use words that really don't mean anything and make it evil, and it's not really evil. It's how you
Right.
use it.
Yeah, and that's the same with the left hand and right hand path and all that stuff that
Yeah.
there that left hand, right hand path and black magic, white magic stuff, that's all malarkey. It's energy and how you use it. Words have energy. So you can make someone scared just based off of your words. And that in itself is magic alone. It's not all this hocus pocus. That hocus pocus stuff that people think about, that's illusion.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
That's
And,
theatrics. Real
and
magic.
words. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
real
Go ahead.
magic comes from the words, like God spells,
Mm.
gospels.
Mm.
And you know what? You said the words, words themselves are patterns, right? And they're, when spoken, they create certain tones and frequencies and so forth. And we always talk about in Mason, we're in pursuit of the lost word. This word could be a tone, could it be a frequency? We study geometry. Geometry teaches us that there's a frequency or pattern to, or excuse me, a pattern to all things that are in nature. And then music teaches us that there's a frequency to all things in nature. You know what I mean? So here we are. At the end of the day, you're taking it right back down to frequencies and vibrations. And I can't remember. I think it was Brother Chris's lecture. I don't really remember. I wrote it down, and he's talking about things that are solid, saying that everything vibrates, and he was mentioning a little bit about things are solid. Now we talked about this in one of our earlier shows. I always ask people this question: being solid is an illusion, because the only reason why my hand can't go through the other hand is because they're vibrating at the same frequency. And so they can't occupy the same place, space, and time, right? So let's say there's an energy, speculation again. There's an energy, we call it a spirit or soul, that exits my body when the body no longer can sustain itself. This energy leaves out. Now, let's say someone right next to me was leaving their body too. Now, at that point, if we're vibrating on the same frequency, do we take on another physical form relative to one another? You follow me with that? Because nothing's really solid. The only reason it appears to be solid is because we're vibrating on the same frequency. And so I always used to think about that. Like, I know it may sound a little bit crazy. Like, if two atoms or electrons meet each other and they're vibrating, and somehow they start to bond or something, right? Are they physical to one another? You know what I mean? This is just my mind speculating again, because at the end of the day, those two are vibrating on the same frequency. So do they have the illusion that they're both physical?
Mm.
And I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but
Well, it's not really crazy when you think about it, because when we're going back to those emotional centers, once again, talking about love, is a magnetic center between the one you find as a spouse.
Yeah.
You come into sync some way with whether making love or some type of mental thing. And your spouse knows you and you know your spouse. That's something instinctual. She just knows you because of the experience of being with you. So if your wife knows your favorite food and she knows how to cook it the way you like it, it's just
Mhm.
by instinct from
She
being with
does.
you. It all ties back into the same thing. Those are frequencies. The relationship that we think and we come into sync with each other to come together and make a show like this is a frequency in itself, because
Yeah, because none of
we're
us are
thinking the
physical
same.
here.
You're over there, and like you always say, Brother Watson, am I looking at you or are you looking at me?
Exactly,
You know,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
know, so it's that same thing. It's a frequency, it's a certain energy that people give off, and they meet on that same level. It's all around us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. And then, and even in chemistry, in biology, they talk about bonding, covalent bonding. You know what I mean? It's like I always wonder, like um, when two electrons and so forth get together, how do they know that, hey, you're for me and I'm not for you? You know what I mean? Like there's only certain types of um, bonding that will take place within nature. How do they determine that? Is it like us when we look at someone like, oh, I'm not feeling her, or of a woman look at a man and say, I'm not feeling him. You know what I mean? For some reason, they're just not vibrating. We even say that when we walk in a room. Sometimes we say, man, I got some funny vibes in here. I had a story when I was a kid. And I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, and I visited this place with a friend of mine, a real good friend of mine, and we was there to do some things that we weren't supposed to be doing. And when we went in there, I got really nervous, and I just started shaking, and I was like, man, I told him, I said, let's go, man. And he never known me to be a spooky, nervous type guy. I said, man, let's get out of here right now. And so we left, we departed it, and the next day, I had saw on the news that that place that we was in, it had got shot up a little bit after we had left, and some of the folks in there had got killed. And it just, it was a vibe. It was, when I say a vibe, it was like I was afraid. I just like, in it, my heart started beating, and I said, man, let's get out of here right now, man. And so I don't, again, it's like, and I know you guys have probably walked in areas before and say, hey, something ain't right in here. You know what I mean? It could have been somebody they were just talking about you when you walked, when you walked in. So we're dealing with energies and frequencies all day long, you know.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's what people always say. Well, something about that person just doesn't sit well with me, or
Yeah.
something in my spirit ain't right. You know how they used to say, the mother, your grandma used to say, something ain't right about that boy. Something
Yeah,
wrong with
yeah,
him.
yeah,
You better
yeah,
check on him. Yeah,
yeah,
I remember growing up. Um, my mom was very strict about going into other people's homes. You can go outside and play,
yeah,
but you bet not go inside the house, because I don't know what type of spirits they got going on up in there. But that
yeah,
was just a way of saying you don't know what their frame of mind is. You don't know how they conduct themselves on a daily basis. You don't know if it can influence you, because we being spiritually based beings, a lot of times we absorb the environment that's around us,
yeah,
and we take that with us, because sometimes we feel heavy after we leave a certain event with a bunch of people. It's like, no, that was heavy. Something was going on and I didn't like it. And my wife will always say, hey, you need to clean yourself up. Something happened. And I said, yeah, it was a rough day and it was a little dragging. There was some things going on. And I might have to sage myself a little bit, because it can wear on you, and
yeah.
it can be infectious. So it is true. I agree with that. It's very true.
Yeah, it's kind of like goes back to even like with the lodge, you know what I mean? You got to make sure you tile the right energies. Everyone, all the energies can't come in. You know what I mean? They have to be tiled. And it's kind of like I look at the lodge, man. I look at those different parts of the lodge, just like Brother Christopher had broke it down, is part of me. You know what I mean? That, those are my thoughts. I have to tile and make sure the right thoughts in here. Are they the good thoughts? If not, I got to purge them. They got to go, right? They don't have the word. They got to get on up out of here, right? So um I like to be able to these different schools of thought be able to relate it back to self, because I think they're all teaching knowledge of self. That's the journey, that's the trek, that's that magnum opus that Brother Pike was talking about, and many other folks that came before us would talk about knowledge of self. That's that journey, not the universe but the innerverse. And I think Brother Barrett was saying earlier about they understood that if they understood themselves, the innerverse, that they would understand the universe. And I wrote down, Brother Christopher had during his lecture, he wrote on there that the Atma was a ray of it was a ray of the source of all. And that just it's just beautiful. I'm just sitting here like I had never really read any of that stuff before, but it resonates with me because I've learned the same thing in other schools of thought, right? And it says, and then that ray that comes from Atma was that prana, right? So I've heard prana before. I knew prana was energy. It just makes sense. I don't care if they call it Atma, prana, whatever we call it, what you want to call it. At the end of the day, all of these schools are teaching us the same thing, that we are a part of, we're the all, a part of all. Literally, that's what they're all teaching us. And to understand all, the all has to understand self. And literally self is, as Brother Wills was saying earlier, that I always say, and I actually stole it from someone years and years ago, I can see you looking back at me to see if I'm looking back at you to see if we are looking, because there's nothing here anyway but all. That's it. All of this stuff it's crazy. It's like people say, well, if you talk to yourself, you're crazy. All is talking to itself through different characters. Brother Coney, Williams, Barrett, Leonard, Watson. This is all talking to the all, if that makes any sense.
So
You know.
And it does, but it's a beautiful tidbit that any school of thought, any religion can all tie itself together without in harmony,
Yeah.
because it is a ray of the absolute all in all of us. Well, in for the Christians or for whoever, God breathed in that spirit. So if every man, God breathed in that spirit, boom, no matter what your belief, your doctrine, your study, your practice, we all have that same spirit. We're all connected. We're all brothers in arms, whether you're a Buddhist, a Christian, practicing Islam, Hinduism, we're all brothers of the same thing. And if I could touch on Brother Vaughn's last point, how when you experience something and something wrong with that boy from your grandma, or you go somewhere and you have a long day and you just feel the vibe is off. Well, when you come into the lodge, you have to divest yourself of all metal, right? So you got
Yes.
to divest yourself of all that could hinder your temple. And then
Mm,
it hit me a second ago that okay, well we're divested and we have a cable tow. Well, that cable tow could be that grounding wire that allows anything that could disrupt to safely discharge. So
mm,
first time I thought about it, but it's
mm.
like we come
I
in
like that.
and you hoodwink, you hear them knocks, and they don't register until you think about it later. It's like, wait, all this was happening to get me to the frequency of what's going on around me, to raise my level of vibration and frequency up to my environment. I'm divested, so instead of something hindering my growth and elevation, we're gonna take everything away from you that could hinder your progress and hinder your growth, bring you in, give you a ground wire,
Mm,
uh, blind you so you can't be distracted, and then we're gonna raise you up to our level.
Yeah.
And then once you go out, all right, come back in. We're gonna talk to you a little bit. Then we're gonna do it again next time and do it again. And then eventually it start to click. Like, wow, all these things are going on, and I never thought about it. It didn't click until a brother said these words, or Brother Watson said that statement, and then it all comes back. And it's like, wow, these trains of thought, these practices. Every one of us has read and studied different things, have traveled different paths, yet we've all been able to somehow match each other's frequency on each other's own level, wherever we may be, and come together to do a show like this. and it just shows the unity and harmony that can be required when you are trying to progress on that spiritual journey. So just
Hey, I like
a
that
lot to
ground
take
wire.
in.
Yeah, they
I
grounded
like that
wired.
ground wire.
That's fire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
reminded me
fire.
of something. I don't want to
Yeah.
jump too much into the Royal Arch. And then going back to the ephod, the high priest, the ephod, he's got the ephod on with the breastplate rather.
Mhm.
And then, the high priest also has a cord or cable
Yeah, yeah.
wrapped around his leg.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
doesn't he have bells on
Yes.
to on his ankles or something like that? I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact thing,
bells
but
on the fringe of his skirts.
That's right.
Or his
Yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
And all that's biblical, you know what I mean? That, so folks know we're not really revealing anything. If you study the Bible, all of those stories
Right.
are there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just in wrapping it up, I know we're coming to a close. We taught Wharton School of Instruction yesterday, and a question came up. One of the up and coming worshipful masters. The question is, when you're running lodge and it's closed, and there are distinct knocks at the outer door. Okay, if it's a Grand Lodge officer and it's unplanned, does the worshipful master have the prerogative to not admit the Grand Lodge officer if he feels as though it is interrupting his business in the lodge? Now, remember I said unplanned. Now, see, here's the caveat though. If you are a Grand Master, you can go in any lodge because it's your lodge. You may enter and leave the door open because it's immediately your lodge. But I brought that up because I know a lot of times as worshipful master, or as it was told to us tonight, your ego, okay, sometimes you'll hear something on the outside and the junior deacon, which works for the senior warden, has to ask your ego, is it okay to ascertain, okay, what is the knocks? I must ascertain. So he has to ask permission to even go and see what is being asked of the Tyler. So before he can go to the door, then he goes to the door and he asks the Tyler, hey, what's going on? So there's certain checks and balances, even the lodge represents that's within ourselves, as we told us tonight, which I thought was fabulous about all the positions in the lodge, that we can, if we use properly, we can admit or not admit certain individuals or certain things into our minds so that we maintain order in our lodge or in our minds. So it's just a representation of what and how we should conduct ourselves in our daily lives, us, in our mind, hearts, and our guts. So I thought it was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful analogy that you gave there. Now, I would have instructed that warden, right? It is never a good idea to deny a Grand Lodge officer interest into your lodge, even though he has the prerogative.
Yes.
But do you want to exercise that?
It's like you can, but should you?
Yeah, that's one of those things that just like if when I was a master, if a Grand Lodge officer knocked on the lodge door, they were entering. Just no way around it,
Right.
And then as far as I know, in our jurisdiction, when the Grand Master opens the door, it never closes. And when the junior deacon comes back to inform the master who's out there, he never says he's asking for permission. He says he is about to
That's
enter.
right. That's right. That's right.
So there
He's
ain't
not
no
crave entrance. He's coming
yeah,
in.
yeah. So all the other Grand Lodge officers normally are asking to come in, but the Grand Master, no, he's about to come up in here. Get yourself ready, your mind right. Yeah.
And it's funny because most of the time, now when we in our jurisdiction, if anybody's visiting Grand Lodge, they will give notice.
They should. That's a
Unless
proper
it's
way to
and
do
yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah,
proper. But
that's
there are
proper.
times when they just want to pop in and do an audit. Hey, you better
Yeah.
brother in, man.
And the thing is, if cooler heads prevail, you know what I mean? Like, so if an officer showed up and didn't give notice, then that's wrong, right? You should give them notice. Why? Because the master want to get ready. He want to show out. He want to have all his people there. You should give him an opportunity to get right.
Right.
But then on the flip side of it, if the master didn't allow him to come in, I still would be a little disappointed in the master. Okay, we know he was wrong. He showed up without notice, but come on, it's the Grand Lodge. Let him on that.
That's
We don't
right.
have anything to hide.
That's
Bring
right.
him on in. You know.
That's right.
Yeah. But it's normally when the egos get in the way. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's then there's a problem. Let's say if that master and that Grand Lodge officer are not on good terms, then he may exercise his right to say, he's not coming in here.
That's right.
You know, never a good idea, though. I don't think so.
Yeah, we take the word of the worshipful master to an extreme sometimes.
Yeah,
Means
yeah,
some of us take that word, we go hard wild with it. And it's like,
yeah.
you don't want to do that, brother.
Nope, nope, nope.
All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right now. So again, like to everybody, thank you for viewing Esoteric Lighthouse. Um, once again, we'll see you next month, and next month we'll be going over signs and symbols.
Mm,
I'm pretty sure that a lot of people would love that one.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
All right, have a
All
good
right.
evening.